Industry executives divided on President Trump's tariff plan. Joining us to make their cases, Dan Eberhart. He's CEO of Canary Energy Company, and he is against imposing tariffs. Also with us is Alan Tonelson. He's founder of RealityChek. He is in favor of tariffs. Mr. Eberhart, let me start with you. You run an oil business. How would it be impacted by steel tariffs?
Well, it's already impacting us, starting today. So we buy more than $10 million a year of steel from imported steel, and our steel costs since Thursday have gone up about 8%. Normally, when we buy steel, we get quoted 3 weeks. The price holds for 3 weeks, and as of this morning, we were told they're only holding the price for a day, so it's already negatively impacting our business.
And, people say, well, why don't you just buy domestic steel? The special steel that you use in your pipelines, you say there's a shortage of here in the United States. So that's not an alternative for you, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, it's not really priced to us as domestic or international. We're looking for the cheapest steel we can find that meets our specifications so that we can be competitive with our competitors and so that the U.S. oil and gas industry can be competitive with OPEC.
Hey, Alan, you hear this man. Why do you want to hurt his business?
Well, this sounds to me like a company that's telling us that the only way that it's become competitive and that it can remain competitive is by being able to purchase large volumes of steel that is not only priced artificially low, but whose prices are being set by a big foreign government. That is a heck of a formula for competitiveness. What about innovation? What about productivity? What about improving products? What about improving processes? And how on earth did you ever compete before the Chinese began massively dumping steel onto global markets?
What do you say, Dan?
How did that happen?
We did compete, and we do compete. I think U.S. shale has changed the world. And we're producing 5 million barrels a day more oil in the U.S. than we were in 2008.
And it's not just because you're getting cheap Chinese steel that's being dumped by the Chinese government. Of course it's not.
I don't think it's artificially low. I think it's a competitive.
It's not artificially low. The price is being
wait a minute. Hang on, Alan.
The price is being set by the Chinese government.
One at a time. Dan, go ahead.
Look, I think it's a free market, and I think that I would like to have a free market where we can buy where we want to buy from and make it the most competitive as possible so that we can compete with both our competitors and we compete with OPEC and other oil-producing countries so we can keep the jobs here. Also, I think it will drive up the cost of energy that consumers pay at the pump and in jet fuel via plane ticket prices, et cetera, et cetera.
But, Dan, imagine that you're an executive in the steel industry and you know that China has a lot of extra capacity that they subsidize uneconomically, which leads to far greater supply in the world markets than otherwise would be there, and therefore depresses the price of their product. I mean, what if China, in fact, probably do this, artificially subsidize or really subsidize all of their oil companies and then hence would push down the price of oil?
Sure. Well, I think then we would have to focus on something else. I think that everything is a worldwide industry, and I think that we've got to be competitive. I think it goes back to Economics 101 and guns and butter. But I think that trying to set prices artificially high, we should look to history, look to Smoot-Hawley, and see how that turned out. I don't think it turned out well. I also think, I think the initial cost being the 25% and the 10% on aluminum is one thing, but we've also got to factor in the retaliatory measures that are going to happen by our trade partners, and that's going to be a further negative knock-on effects here that affect the entire economy.
Alan, big picture, though, ultimately, is our tariffs a growth strategy for the United States? In
the biggest possible picture and the longest run, absolutely, unless you think that the United States can grow healthily at all with a steadily increasing presence of Chinese government-subsidized products in its own market. If you value free markets, which of course we all do and we all should, that's the last thing you should want to see, and it can't possibly make for healthy growth over the long term.
Alan, you've been a guest on CNBC for as long as I've been anchoring, which is longer than I care to admit. Let me ask you, if there were zero tariffs in China, if China did not subsidize steel, would you be against these tariffs? I mean, you have supported tariffs ever since I've known you. Do you want them because you think the rest of the world is hurting us? Or, would you get rid of them if, in fact, we really did have free trade?
We are so far from a free market in not only steel, in farm products, in aluminum, in manufactured goods all over the world. In fact, free trade happens to be a principle that is largely honored in the breach by the entire global trading system except for the United States, which remains by far the most open market in the entire world. And when this system is being
I disagree with that. I think you look at countries like Singapore, you look at cities like Hong Kong.
Singapore is a city-state. Hong Kong is a city-state. These are city-states. These are not large, diversified national economies. They have nothing to do economically and geographically or natural resource-wise or anything-wise with an enormous 330 million population country like the United States. That's a ridiculous comparison.
Singapore's got 6 million people and a GDP
6 million
of
people,
$350
golly,
billion.
that's about as big as what? New York City back in 1961?
But contrary to your example, though, it's still a country.
Fine, but its circumstances are so completely different from those of the United States in more ways than anybody could possibly count. I can't imagine that I'm even hearing this.
Why does that matter, though, Alan? Why does that matter? I think the free market will drive costs down, which is ultimately better for our economy, better for economic growth, and better for consumers.
Well, first of all, if you think there's a free market in steel, you are sorely mistaken, because you seem to be totally missing the massively important role being played by Chinese government policy and Chinese subsidies. And because steel is will you please let me finish?
In the US.
There is no free market in China, and China sets the global price. And just as oil is a single integrated global market whose price is often set by the actions of a cartel like OPEC, steel is a globally integrated market, and the price is set to a very great extent, again, by a Chinese government whose policies have ensured that it makes fully half the world's steel now in a totally unprofitable basis.
What we have to roll over with
when China is such a major actor, it's obviously going to have a huge impact on prices.
We'll let you talk to each other in the break, maybe.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
This is what lunches have been like in the last 5 days.
Right.
Dan Eberhart from Canary Oil, Alan Tonelson. Thank you.